I want to welcome everyone to the University of Arizona Museum of Art's Thursday Art Talk with the artists Randiesia Fletcher and Miller and Kathleen Dreier. My name is Chelsea Farrar, and I'm the Curator of Community Engagement here at the U of A Museum of Art. And it is my pleasure to welcome you all here this afternoon or early evening. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the University of Arizona sits on the homelands of indigenous peoples who have stewarded this land since time immemorial, including the Tohono O'odham and Pascua Yaqui, and we recognize the 22 sovereign nations of what is now called Arizona. Aligning with the university's core value of a diverse and inclusive community, it is our responsibility to recognize and acknowledge the people, culture, and history that make up this wildcat community. And at the institutional level, we must be proactive in broadening awareness throughout campus and beyond to ensure our students feel represented and valued. And in this virtual format, I know that many of our guests here today, as we're seeing in the chat, are joining us from across the United States. So I encourage you to learn what indigenous lands you inhabit. And welcome. I would love again to say welcome to the Museum of Art. And I'm really glad that you've joined us today and what I know will be really an incredible conversation with these three inspiring artists. I also want to offer a little shout out and thank you to our museum members for their continued support. It is really through our members' continued support, especially this year, that we're able to continue to host these important conversations such as this. So thank you. And if you're not already a museum member and you're interested in learning more about the program and how it supports these important programs, such as our artist talks, as well as our exhibitions and other public programs, our museum member coordinator, Natasha Allen, is with us here today. And she can share in the chat the link to learn more about how to join, or maybe even how to give a gift of membership to someone this year. And again, thank you to all of our members. And one thing that I'd like to kind of offer as an option, because we have so many people joining us here today, if we start to have issues with connectivity, what I'd like to ask is that you can stop your video at the bottom of your Zoom window. Because we have a lot of folks joining us from across the state and the country where Wi-Fi and internet access is not as strong. Sometimes stopping your video feed can help with other folks' bandwidth issues. So thank you if you're able to do that. Another option is that we are also live streaming this video on Facebook Live currently. So if you're having any connectivity issues, you can jump off of Zoom and join us actually over on our Facebook page on the U of A Museum of Art. And that video will be available after today's presentation as well. So if you miss anything, you can catch us over there. And we are also recording, and it will make it available on our YouTube page after today's talk. Anyone joining us over on Facebook, thanks for joining us. And you're able to, we invite you to offer comments, questions. You can leave them on Facebook, and then we'll make sure we carry them over here on Zoom. And we will have time for Q&A at the end of today's talk. And those of you joining us here in Zoom world, you can use the chat feature to add comments or questions for any of our speakers here today. And we definitely want to encourage a conversation with all of you here. All right, so today's talk, Art as Activism and Radical Acts of Self-Care, highlights three artists from our current online and virtual exhibition, Picturing 2020, A Community Reflects. Our curator of exhibitions, Olivia Miller, is going to share a little bit more about this exhibition.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. And thank you all so much for joining us today. This is going to be a really great program. So I just want to give you a very quick snippet of what this exhibition is about. Because as much as museums exist in part to preserve and interpret objects of the past for a living audience, at the same time, we have to be flexible enough to respond to the present times, to the history that's actively being made. So therefore, rather than push forward with the exhibitions that we had planned long before COVID, we decided that we needed to change course and we needed to instead respond to the present moment. So we created the online exhibition, Picturing 2020, A Community Reflects. Initially, the show was going to be called Picturing a Pandemic, but it quickly became clear that 2020 was much more than the events of COVID. So we're also seeing a worldwide movement for racial justice, a growing economic crisis, a heavily charged political climate, and all the while this is still happening against the effects of climate change. As we saw here over the summer, witnessing the beautiful Catalinas burning. So we issued a call to artists in Pima County because we wanted to take a moment to specifically recognize and focus on our local community and to understand how people here were using art to communicate, to process, and to illustrate their experiences. And we were absolutely overwhelmed by the number of submissions, by the variety of artwork that people submitted, by the incredible quality of the artwork, by the commonality in themes. But above all, we were so humbled by the honesty of all of the artists. Every single one of them has shared something very profound and very personal to them with our entire community. And I think that's what has struck us the most. And while we truly believe in the benefit of viewing artwork in person, whenever possible, one of the upsides to this online exhibition is that we were able to feature so many more artists than we would have if the exhibition was held in our physical space. And so that's kind of a silver lining to this whole thing. So if you have not already, definitely take some time to explore the exhibition. I'll put the link to the show in the chat if you have not already seen it. And you'll see for yourself that Tucson is just an amazing community full of creative thinkers and makers. So thank you all, and a special thanks to all of the artists who are part of the exhibition.
Great, thank you so much, Olivia. All right, and without further delay, I would like to introduce you all to all of our speakers that are joining us today. First is M. Miller. M explores human and inanimate connection, communication, and modes of intimacy through facilitation, performance, video, and play, grounded in learning environment design and relational aesthetics. Miller holds bachelor degrees in early childhood education and recreation management from Ohio University, Athens, Ohio, and a master's degree in arts and cultural management from Pratt Institute, New York, New York. They currently live and work in Tucson, Arizona, and we're so grateful that they're actually joining us here today from outside of the States. Thank you for being here, Em. And our Tucson Public Voices Fellow, Randiesia Fletcher, is an author, educator, and public speaker. Randiesia is originally from LA with a childhood plagued with abuse, neglect, and homelessness. As a teen, she enlisted into the United States Marine Corps. This proved to also have its own challenges of racism and sexism, and subsequently she retired as a disabled veteran. Fletcher completed a Bachelor's of Arts in Creative Writing, Anthropology, as well as a Master of Arts in Education. She has published several articles and books on social, cultural, and diverse relationships. She is also the founder of the nonprofit I Can Do All Things, Inc., dedicated to helping alleviate generational poverty through teaching sustainability education. Additionally, she co-created the nonprofit organization Refugee Resource Center to advocate for refugees, asylees, and others victimized by poverty and sexual assault. Randiesia is an expressionist artist and maintains a mobile museum and pop-up library. Her artwork challenges the perceptions of Pan-African faces, particularly a non-smiling face. Her goal is to redefine these faces that have been subjected to stereotypical thugs, criminals, harlots, Jezebels, and exotic sapphires. Thank you, Randiesia, for being with us today. And last is Kathleen Dreier. Kathleen is a down-to-earth, engaging, and diverse photographer based in Tucson for the last 16 years. She's able to walk in many worlds, both private and public, documenting it authentically. Kathleen's work involves short and long-term assignments, select donated service, and personal projects. Kathleen has had a 3-decade career as a social worker, giving her a skill set and sensitivity to the broad nature of the human experience, and allowing her a unique doorway to establishing rapport and understanding the dynamics of those with which she photographs and collaborates with. Kathleen's style has been informed by being a student of Mary Ellen Mark, many mentors, and a multi-year workshop assistant for Mary Virginia Swanson. This past March, when the COVID-19 pandemic shut the economy down, Kathleen lost all of her regular work. To make good use of her time, challenge herself to learn something new, and because of her drive to do something that might be helpful to others, Kathleen created 3 portrait series to address the issues of the day: Tucson frontline workers, Tucson Black voices, and what white people think. The 3 series are evolving continuously and at times intersect. We're so honored and excited to have all 3 of you with us today, have your work included in the exhibition, and today share your voices with us. So welcome, welcome these 3 artists. And first, Em Miller, would you like to share a little bit more about your work?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Em. Thanks, Chelsea and Olivia, for this opportunity to talk about my work with these other awesome artists. And for so many friends that I see here, I love that I can see everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. I want to start with this slide, which sort of will guide us through my presentation. This is a postcard size image that I made for a fundraiser for the New York-based organization Visual Aids. And each year they have a fundraiser where artists submit postcard sized work that is then sold as an awesome fundraiser for the organization. And so this year I cut up a quote from Piaget, constructivist child development theorist. And it says over here on the right, games with rules involve a code that may be temporary, maybe a temporary spontaneous agreement. And so most of what I think about is games and relationships and how people interact together. So this slide you'll see again as we go through some of my work. And the first sort of category I've put my work in is one about touch, community, and negotiation. And so I first want to talk about Stay Gold, which is the intergenerational LGBTQIA+ arts program at Museum of Contemporary Art in Tucson. And it's run by Eli Burke, who's the director of education there. And this is a wonderful group. And so many of my friends from Stay Gold are on this call too. Hey, everybody. This is a really inspiring, loving group of people who come together in the museum. Now we're virtual, but we make work together and talk about queerness through generations with not always a lot of agreement and lots of different perspectives. So a lot of my work comes out of or is made for my time in this program. This first video is the video that's included in the exhibition Picturing 2020 at the museum. And 2 of my friends from Stay Gold let me take their pictures as they were giving a haircut. One was giving a haircut to the other, and then they gave each other shoulder rubs. And so they're both masked, and we were talking as this was happening about the risk that's present with the pandemic and also between generations. Sometimes there's a lot of risk of not understanding where people are coming from today as opposed to in the past. And so I see that as a parallel to risking being together physically within the pandemic. And there's also a lot of reward that's possible in that too. And so I've got risk and reward flashing in red neon letters, sort of like the intensity of the risk and the intensity of reward that might be present here. And let me see if it'll go to the next one. Yeah. This is another video work that I made this year in collaboration with my friend Gail Brickert Albrecht, who's 30 years older than me and also a member of Stay Gold. We made this in the summer in Tucson, so really hot, sharing resources of water and physical closeness in this pandemic. And so when we made this, I was thinking about this negotiation of sharing moments like this between generations again, and also sharing germs and resources. And also a negotiation for me in this was about how my relationship style from being polyamorous most of my adult life might change in a pandemic in order to keep a partner safe. I might have to exit and start again on the next one with a video. Okay. And so that's going to take us into another area of my work having to do with care and objects and personas. This work is called the Pull-String Companion series, and there are a lot of other photos that go along with this, and it's in collaboration with Pamela, who you see right here, smiling, and then Sandra over here on this shoulder. So these dolls are really special to me. I found them at a treasure shop in Tucson pretty much immediately after I moved here, after I left New York to come to Tucson. And I needed something to love as I was here on my own. So when I found these dolls, I sort of took them in and they live with me now, along with a lot of other dolls that people have given me since I started making this work. But I think they're really cool. I'm really interested in the mechanics of them. Both of these dolls are from the 1960s, and Pamela in particular has a crank at the back of her neck, which turns her head, and she has 3 different faces. She has a smiling face, a crying face, and a sleeping face. And I think that's just like such an amazing idea. Someone was like, let's give the doll 3 faces, and that won't scare kids. So I think that was an interesting idea. And Sandra over here is a pull string doll, where you pull a ring and a string in the back of her, and then her lips move and her eyes move, and she tells you she wants to be your friend and that she has really great vision because she eats carrots. So I'm really interested in like how these dolls were made and what they were used for then, but also that they've been around for 65 years and they still exist, and they're in pretty good condition, but they've had this whole other life before me. And so I explore the world now with them, and sort of investigate non-traditional family structures and queer kinship with them. These photos were taken at the JCPenney Portrait Studio at the Tucson Mall, which I think doesn't exist anymore at this point. But when we were waiting for our turn to take this picture, there was a child who was sort of circling me and really interested in the dolls, but very skeptical. And she said, why do you want to have your picture taken with these dolls? My mom would never let me do that with my dolls, because my mom says it's only important to have your picture taken with your real family. And so I was really surprised that child was trying to shame me in that way, but also it gets at part of the idea of this project is that care and love and families can look a lot of different ways, depending on what you're into. And so another video work and another object-based work that I have here is called Clean Something Like You Like It. And I also made this for Stay Gold. It's a video that's sort of instructional about cleaning this 1950s TV lamp that's in the shape of a horse. And so I get out the water and the soap, and then I start cleaning it, and it kind of gets a little sensual at the end. And it's kind of funny too, but it's sort of an investigation in empathy and how empathy can lead to care. So if I believe that this horse can want me to clean it and bathe it and have this moment together, then I care to clean the horse. I like the music with this video, but I haven't included it here. A couple of personas that I work with relating to care are this one, Dr. Paulina. This is called the Pull String Therapist. And I also made this in the moment where I was preparing to leave New York to come to Tucson. And I was about to leave my whole community in New York, which also meant leaving my partner at the time and leaving my therapist. So I wanted to take my therapist lessons with me. And so I embodied a therapist, not necessarily mine, but, and then for an audience, I sit as a therapist and I have a pull string attached to my clipboard here. So this came before the dolls, the pull string dolls, but it's related. Audience members would approach me and pull the string, and then I had pre-recorded questions or comments in my own voice that were actual things my therapist had said to me through the years. And so once I play that question for the audience member, they answer really authentically. And it's kind of a cool experience to take on a role, to learn how to care for someone else, and in turn, learn how to care for myself. And similarly, this is another persona that's very near and dear to my heart. This is Bev. Bev is an aging lesbian who owns a bar in Greeley, grill when it's spelled with an E at the end, Greeley in Florida. That's where she owns this bar. And Bev came about in 2016. I was going on these family vacations with my parents and siblings, and there was some conflict sometimes, and also some discomfort with my queerness. And so Bev sort of emerged as a character, as a buffer between myself and my family. And so Bev runs this bar at all family vacations. And she gets my family to play with them. And so at this point, everyone in my family has chosen their own name for this game that we play. And my mom and my sisters work for Bev. One of them is the cook, one of them's the happy hour bartender, and one of them does the dishes. And now anytime I'm coming around, my family asks if Bev is coming too. So I really owe a lot to Bev for sort of making that transition for me, for my family, respecting and enjoying my queerness. This last section that I want to talk about has to do with play and the creation of environments and having fun, which is a big part of my work. This is the Beaver Lodge, and the Beaver Lodge is a pop-up queer bar or event that I run in my backyard. And it emerged in sort of the beginning of the pandemic, when, we don't know how long this will last. And I had a concern for some of my friends who were older than me, who maybe live alone, or who have the potential to become really isolated. And so trying to find ways in which we can come back together in physical space together, but masked and distanced, and with everyone having their own seat and their own table and their own drink and their own snack, and having it limited to a certain number of people each time it happens, and having people plan to attend ahead of time. So RSVPs. So a lot of these rules, I guess, structures where these experiences can happen inside of. So this has been happening since, I think, April or May. And it's been really fun to think of the Beaver Lodge as a space where we can come together. People look forward to coming. Sometimes people arrive and they say, this is the only place I'm willing to come because it feels safe, and because I get to still meet people, meet new people and see old friends and have conversations, and know what to expect as far as safety goes. And so we've made hats and stickers and business cards and koozies, and had a lot of fun with what can happen at the Beaver Lodge. And like there was the Beaver Moon on November 30th. So we had like a special edition Beaver Lodge in which I put a sheet on the trailer that's behind my house, and we watched a documentary about beavers, and everyone was very into it. And sometimes we have fires, like we had a Halloween party in which people could be together and sort of have a reason to celebrate. So that all feels really good for me. And part of the purpose for me with the self-care aspect is I felt really nervous at the beginning of the pandemic because I like to host, I like to welcome people, I like to play games with people. And for me not to be able to do those things makes it a really bleak outlook for me if I'm not able to have fun and imagine and be creative with others in this way. So that's sort of how this came about, and it's still going on today, and you're all invited. And you can find out more about the Tucson Beaver Lodge on Instagram at Tucson Beaver Lodge. And yeah, I'll leave you with that.
That's fantastic, and thank you so much. I know I already have lots of questions that I hope I get to ask you. And just a reminder that we're using the chat feature here, that if you have questions or comments for any of the artists, please drop them in the chat, and we'll be saving some time for a Q&A at the end. Fantastic. Well, Randiesia, would you like to offer more about your work?
Yes, thank you, Chelsea, and thank you, Olivia, for extending this invitation to me. I really appreciate it, and I thank everyone who participated today. And I'm truly grateful that you took the time out to just meet with us today. So my work really comes from where I come from, how I grew up, and how I experienced life. So Chelsea, you gave a snippet on how I grew up. So I grew up on Skid Row. And so, you know, growing up that way, both of my parents were drug addicted. And so we were constantly trying to understand where to find food, where to find housing, and where to find money. And I grew up this way, and children who experience poverty, there's ramifications and there's long lasting effects that go along with it. And so as I got older, you know, I knew I wanted to be an artist about 12 years old, but in my consciousness, there was no way that I was going to be an artist because artists didn't make any money. So that wasn't, it wasn't feasible. It wasn't a feasible career for me. So I decided to say, you know, I wanted to be an architect, knowing that I wanted to be an artist. And but architecture is not really what I wanted to go into. And so I went into a variety of different fields, ended up going into the Marine Corps. And it was not a pleasant experience for me in some ways. It's half and half. So there's benefits by all means. And so, you know, I was sexually assaulted, and then I experienced a lot of racism while I was in the Marine Corps, and I ended up being retired as a disabled veteran. And so all of these experiences that I have shaped this creativity within me. And so though I said I would never become an artist because of the fact that I couldn't make money off of it as a 12-year-old, art continued to live and breathe through me through writing and through drawing and painting and making cards and just making gifts along the way. So I decided to really just focus on just painting and give up the things that that weren't necessary, and really learn to be okay with expressing myself. And so the images that I create journey back to a couple hundred years, and just the experiences that Black, Indigenous, and people of color have experienced through the years. And they are interwoven within my own experiences, because I do believe that trauma is within our DNA. And I also believe that our experiences kind of live. Like my great grandmother, she was born in 18 something. So just knowing that she understood slavery like firsthand. And so those stories are clear to me because I spent time with my great grandmother. So I decided to just start painting from those stories, that vividness. And I did a lot of reading of Gwendolyn Brooks and Alice Walker and Toni Morrison and W.E.B. Du Bois. And one of the things that W.E.B. Du Bois talks about is the double consciousness of how we perceive ourselves versus how the world perceives us. Like I just see myself as Randiesia, right? But when I walk out this door right here, I have to be conscious of the fact that my name is Randiesia, and if people see Randiesia written down on a paper, it's automatically, they all automatically know that, oh, that's a Black girl over there. So sometimes I have to ask myself, do I shorten my name to Randie Fletcher, which is my brother's and my father's name? Or do I keep it as Randiesia, where it's identifiable as a Black woman, part of the diaspora, African diaspora? And so that's a place that I battle with. And so, but sometimes I will use Randy and I will put a DY, so I'm racially and sexually ambiguous. So when people accept my application or my submissions, they won't know who I am or what I am. They'll just base it off of, oh, that's good to go right there, and won't discriminate based on my sex or my name. So this image behind me, the one that I submitted for the event this year, is called the Watching Collection. And it was, it's been on display virtually at the University of Arizona. And I thank you for taking this display. And it was down in the Ann Gallery recently. And I'm just gonna go over the story with you. So it was a couple years ago, and it just kind of talks about the life that I live, the everyday experiences, my everyday experiences, and how I see myself as just Randiesia. But when I walk out this door, I'm expected to, I'm seen as a Black woman. I'm seen as, maybe she has an attitude. And one of my friends, it's just a running joke, says she's grit number 60. You know, because I'm a little abrasive, but you know, that's just the way that I grew up, and it's not a harmful thing. It's just who I am. Okay, I'm not threatening. Well, I don't see that myself as threatening, but you know, I'm just Randiesia to myself. And so, a few years ago, I was leaving the swimming pool on Alvernon here in Tucson, Alvernon and Speedway, and I was traveling south on Alvernon. And my 3 children were in the car, and we had on our swimsuits, and we were wet, very wet. Okay, so we're traveling south, and we're passing the Patrick Hardesty police substation, and I served in the Marine Corps with Patrick Hardesty, and he was my CO at the time prior to his passing. So it's always honorable to pass that place, because this man I served with, and he was killed in the line of duty. Once he got out of the Marine Corps with TPD, he was killed. So I saw a police car out the corner of my eye, because I'm constantly watching if the police is going to follow me. And that's just a consciousness of a Black person. We're always watching to see if the police is going to follow us. So I saw the police car. I made a left. I checked to make sure my kids had their seatbelts on, because they are little children, and of course they have their seatbelts on. And then I told them, just make sure you guys are sitting still. Conversation, it's a normal conversation all the time. I see the police, I check my kids, tell them, make sure they're sitting still. I make a left on 22nd. I'm headed east on 22nd. I'm headed towards the Burger King. And of course, the police car gets behind me, and then he flashes me. And so I didn't want to pull off to the right, because you know, it's oncoming traffic and he might get hit. I was concerned about him. And so I pulled and turned behind the Burger King, and it was like a blind spot. So we got pulled over, guns drawn, with me and my wet children, with a police cruiser, and to my understanding, just a bike cop. But later on found out it was more than 2 cars pulled us over. And they said that I fit the description of a Hispanic male wearing a blue hat, smoking weed. Now, I understand that Hispanic could be dark skinned like me, because there's people from Brazil, there's people from Central America. So maybe I could be misconstrued as Hispanic. However, I don't think that I look male, and if I do, or if I offend anybody, but you know, that's just my perception. I go by she, and I look like a woman to myself. So with that, they said that I fit the description, and then he took my license and my registration, asked me, did I have guns in the car with wet children? And then he came back and said, no crime today. And he kind of chuckled and he walked away. After we're scared to death because we're at a blind spot behind Burger King. No one has on body cameras. And I eventually reported it, and it just for nothing, but they know about it, and they came back and found it a justified pullover that I'm a Hispanic male smoking weed with a blue hat on. So I painted these images, and it's called the Watching Collection. And the Watching Collection highlights the consciousness that many Black people, most Black people go through every single day of their lives. And it says, if you didn't know, I see you. And I'm watching behind me just in case. Take a closer look at life. Sometimes we're not paying attention. At that moment with my children, I wasn't paying attention. I was more concerned about that police officer and his safety, and why I didn't pull over just to the right. I turned and parked in a parking lot, thinking that I didn't want this police officer to get hit, because I just watched a video of a highway patrolman in the traffic get hit, and I was concerned about his safety. I served in the Marine Corps, so of course I'm always looking out for another public servant. But I wasn't thinking about myself or my children, and I wasn't paying attention and understanding that, Randiesia, remember, you're Black and you driving while Black, right? So we have to be paying attention. And so I did see him, and I looked behind me, and I checked my kids, and I did see him, and I was watching behind me, but I didn't take a closer look at the situation. And so I found myself here, not paying attention. And so I want to make sure that I get a good understanding in life that I always have to be paying attention a little bit more readily in circumstances and events in my life. And this is the consciousness of many Black people that we go through every single day, that we're constantly watching behind me, letting you know I see you. And I always have to be here taking a closer look, because if I'm not watching, something tragic can happen. And now my children are scarred because of this police event. This is the Watching Collection. I hope that you take the time to look at my website and see more images of what I've done. And all of my characters have a story. They're not just random paintings. We all have a story, and so do they. Thank you for having me.
An incredible portrait series, Randiesia, and really incredibly important to hear the story behind this one particularly. Really, really honored that it's part of our online exhibition right now. Again, I know I have so many questions more that I would love to ask you. I can't wait to follow up in a few minutes. Lastly, but definitely not least, Kathleen Dreier, would you like to talk more about your work?
Yes, thank you so much. Let me share my screen. And is everyone able to see that? And okay, so everything's good. All right. First of all, I would like to thank you, Chelsea and Olivia, and the University of Arizona Museum of Art for the honor of having my work included in this very important exhibit during this very unusual time, and for the opportunity to speak on my work. I'm sharing this slide with you so you can get a sense of who I am as a photographer, because I'm not a fine art photographer in a traditional sense. You'll see me in a variety of different capacities. In the upper row, it's small, but you might notice I am photographing the All Souls procession on stilts. So that was a very unique experience. In the middle row, I'm on top of a motorcycle. I was in Canada photographing a 7-stage cycling race. And to the right of that, or to my left, is a portrait of me in front of a piece of work that I had the great honor to have included in the 2018 Tucson Biennial at the museum. So while working a full-time job as a social worker, being a single mother, and running my photography business in the evening and on the weekends, the other thing that I did was I often went out with my cameras to photograph events happening in town. Being a social worker, I've always been kind of hardwired for issues going on, having just a sensitivity to that. And so I include these couple slides so you can see some of my work regarding that, just documenting what is going on in our community. So I left my job, at the time I was working with Adult Protective Services. I left that job in September of 2018. I wanted to give myself an opportunity to do photography full time. And things were going fabulous. I was doing a lot of events, particularly multi-day corporate events, as well as all of the other types of photography I do, weddings, engagements, family, a lot of work for nonprofits. Then the pandemic hits, and in the span of 3 days that you see on this slide, I lost all of my work for the rest of the year. I reeled in shock like all of us did, trying to figure out just what the heck was going on and what the heck we were going to be doing. Some years ago, I took a workshop from a man named Matthew Jordan Smith. He spoke about the importance of doing personal photography projects while one is in between paid work as a way to stay motivated and pliable and to keep learning. I always took that advice to heart. And in 2013 to 2014 and 15, I produced my first self-published book called Bus Stop Dreams. So after processing for a couple weeks, what do? I gave some thought to the fact that I spent over 3 decades as a frontline worker. I worked in child protective services and adult protective services. I've seen pretty much everything horrible that you can imagine. So I also thought about the fact that frontline workers are often thwarted from saying what they want to say. And so this is how the first series was born. And the reason why I share this background with you is each of the series that I'm doing right now have kind of evolved one after the other and rolled into each other. So the method of doing this was the following. All of the portraits were taken outside, strictly following social distance guidelines. Typically, I went to the person's home. I photographed with a telephoto lens, and I was masked. I was very specific about certain things. I did not formally interview anyone. And the reason for that is quite intentional. I did not want to direct the conversation. Rather, I gave a writing prompt. Another reason why I didn't interview is because of the pandemic. I wasn't going to be sitting with someone asking questions. So I gave the person the opportunity to email me a statement, and then I shared that statement across the various social media platforms. Being a photographer for as long as I have been, I have a following, and I recognized from the onset that I had a way to share other people's words and experiences with the folks who had been following my photography. Now, because of the time limitation, I'm not going to go into describing the Frontline Workers series further, but I'll just show you some portraits real quick. These people wrote amazing statements. This gentleman, just for a brief example, runs an elder home, and he lived in the home for months to make sure that his residents stayed safe. People did tremendous sacrifice. An ER nurse. This young woman works in a lab actually at the University of Arizona. She was working on studies regarding the antibody for COVID. An ER doctor, an oncologist. This is the most recent one I took just last week. To the woman to the left is a constable, and she was required to isolate because she was exposed to COVID. And to the right of her is her husband and her son, and you can see how her son feels about being separated from his mother. So moving forward, in June, I attended a vigil for George Floyd. It was a very powerful vigil here in town, and there were many things that happened during that evening that woke some things in me, aspects of my own ignorance about race relations, the diverse experiences of people who are Black, my own biases, my whitewashed education. So all of these things were really bothering me and reflecting on it. There was a person there that had on the back of their shirt, "Ally is a verb." I didn't even see who the person was because I was photographing with my right hand and doing a live feed with my phone on my left hand. So I took all of those impressions home with me and thought, I need to do something. And so that is how Tucson Black Voices was born. I asked for input from my Black friends. Again, I followed the same guidelines that I had for the frontline workers, and the writing prop I, again, kept very, very global, such as share with us whatever you would like about being a Black person in Tucson. Sorry. I share this screen because this is one of my whys. This is my beautiful son. And one of the reasons is, I always tried to live my life doing the best that I can and helping out wherever I could. And so my son is a great motivator for all of his life. He is now 24 and he's across the country, and I miss him a great deal. This is Randiesia, who you heard her amazing, powerful story. And I want to wish her publicly a happy birthday today. Sean Louis, he is also in this exhibit. He is a performer, musician, poet. Ava is a healer and a massage therapist. Ron is an elder. And for his statement, what he did was he shared an experience when he was a 13-year-old boy, when the KKK came to his kin's house. And the house was filled with relatives. All the smaller children were brisked away and hidden in the kitchen floorboard underneath the ground. And he watched his relatives get out their rifles and deal with the KKK. This is Alana. Her statement expressed fatigue about having to explain her Blackness and what her body can and can't do. This is a gentleman, Joey, who runs a ballet studio here in town with his wife, and his statement spoke about the difficulty about being accepted in his own community because ballet is considered effeminate. Stephen spoke about health in the Black community. Jane spoke about how to protest safely. As a mother, she didn't want to endanger herself or her daughter. Matthew spoke about the education to prison pipeline and the need for reform. Elliot spoke about complicity and about being a Black business owner. Torine is an artist in town. Her murals are by the MSA Annex. Journey here, she is a teenager about to graduate from high school. She created her own body of work. She had contacted young Black teenage women around the country and asked them to send her a self-portrait with a word that described how they were feeling. And I felt like she was doing some brilliant work. This is Robbie and his family. Robbie did the mural that's on the outside of the Rialto, and his statement was very simple. It was, I hope there comes a time when the murals such as mine are no longer needed. Marquez, who is a brilliant poet. In the interest of time, I will speed through a couple of these. Sadie, who is now on the Tucson School Board. She is doing an amazing project documenting and reserving the history of the Sugar Hill neighborhood in Tucson. This is DJ Lex Smith. He spoke about having parents, one brown and one black, how he didn't fit in any race, that he wasn't brown enough when he was with his Mexican relatives, and he wasn't black enough when he was with his black kin. And this is Herman. Herman is an amazing man who is a frontline worker. He is in the hospital and he makes sure that the spaces are clean after COVID patients have been there. He is also the son of his namesake, and he spoke about how he attempts to honor his father by the legacy that his father provided to son. This is Desiree. She runs a nonprofit called IMU 360. This is Jennifer. She's a psychotherapist, and she spoke about in her statement how every time she sees a new patient, she has to validate her expertise because of the color of her skin. She has to assure them, even though she has probably more education than most of her colleagues. Alana, who is a fine art photographer who recreates a correct Black history with her work. My work with Tucson Black Voices has expanded. These gentlemen are part of a group called Pillars and Bridges. Pillars and Bridges is an informal organization that has been having ongoing communication with the police department in an effort to affect change. So I have been now assisting in hosting a monthly event in which they facilitate conversations with the community members, Adiba and Andres. So what happened was in early September, a Black friend had a courageous conversation with me. He said that as an artist, it was time for me to take a greater risk, and that Black people have been explaining for years who they are and what their worth is, and that it was time for us as white people to look at ourselves in the mirror and become social change agents proactively. And so I took his feedback to heart, and that is how What White People Think has formulated. This is my newest series, and I'm just going to very quickly scroll through them. Sorry, when someone's entering the room, my screen freezes up for a minute. So the series continues. To date, I have photographed between the three series, believe it or not, about 185 people, all following social distance guidelines since March. This is Ray. I think what she had to say was important. She's kind of a nomad, and she was in Bisbee when I met her. And she said, you know, it's time for a revolution. I think if we all just woke up and tried to be our best selves every day, we'd have a revolution. And I think she made a very good point. So thank you very much. You're welcome to screenshot this. It shows you all the different places where you can see the work. On Facebook, I have 5 different pages there where the full statements from the people are listed, and Instagram also, as well as my page. And thank you for listening and for allowing me to share this with you.
That's fantastic. Kathleen, thank you so much for sharing more about that. I know, like Randiesia, just hearing more about the process and the timeline and like where this started and where it's going is really, really informative to better understand you as an artist and as well as your work. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And we want to open it up to a conversation and some time for questions from you all. So in addition to leaving comments for our speakers today, please offer some questions into the chat. And I'd love to get the conversation going. And I offer this to any of our artists today. But I think one of the things that unites all of your work is that you're all as artists working to raise a sense of collective consciousness on some critical issues of social justice, critical topics that are more in are more common in our zeitgeist today. I won't say that they're just issues of today. But you know, topics of racism, homophobia, transphobia, sexism, ageism. There's so many critical issues, important issues that you're all addressing, as well as this effort to build community through that work is a common practice that you're all approaching in your work. So I'm wondering if you can offer some feedback and advice of how can other artists respond to these moments.
All I can share is what my experience was, which is a reflecting and just thinking about it, contemplating what can I do, and sitting with the unknown question until the answer arose. And then part of the work evolved through and went to the next phase based upon feedback from people and based upon my own evolutionary process of understanding. So it's ongoing. Like, I don't feel like I haven't reached an ending point and have a lot further to go in this exploration.
Someone asked about another painting. I have another one behind me, if I will, if you don't mind. This painting here is called A Teachable Moment. I don't know if you can remove this. Sorry. There it is. It's called A Teachable Moment. When I was younger, Langston Hughes wrote a poem called Mother to Son. And the poem talks about life ain't no crystal stair and how life isn't easy. And this journey of life is full of, he says the stairs are winding up and there's tacks in it, but don't you set down now, you got to keep going. And the last line says, and I still climbing, honey, I still climbing. And that's what this picture is all about, that a teachable moment that every Black person has with their child. Like, you're gonna go out there and you don't go into their yard over there. And so it's that mom teaching their kid, or that dad teaching their kid those hidden rules of life, that you got to cross that field, you got to climb those mountains, the sun is going to be hot, but you got to get there. And it's that underwritten rules of life. And this is called a teachable moment.
I guess I could jump in and say that what keeps me going and inspires me, and what I would offer as advice to other artists, is to stay connected to your people and to look at as much as you can. A lot of people are making things right now, especially. And there are lots of ways to stay connected virtually, on the phone, FaceTime, Zoom, through media, and with people safely when you can. So staying connected, committing to that.
Love you. Thank you for offering that. And the topic of the talk is this idea of self-care, which definitely came through in so much of your all's practice. So I'm wondering if any of you want to talk a little bit more about how does your art practice and these ideas of self-care kind of connect and overlap and support each other.
For me, I paint, well, one, coming out of the Marine Corps, I have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from the experiences that I had while in with the sexual abuse and assault and the discrimination while in. And it's something that I adequately receive counseling for. So I paint to get what's inside out. And so it's more of that that time where I can put the image, what those things that are pressing in my heart on paper, so I can look at them and talk about them rather than keep them bottled up inside. So this is my method of self-care, of being alone. And it was something that my husband truly pushes for me to do, to make sure that I take time for myself, because I give so much to others that I have to give time for myself as well. And so that's one of the main reasons that I paint. And this is my method of self-care, writing and painting.
I had an interaction with a person during the process of doing Tucson Black Voices who made it very clear that I was to not tag their organization in the work. And it was a very difficult conversation, but important and necessary. And throughout the course of the conversation, I found myself, I was really genuinely trying to listen to her concern while simultaneously processing what my work was. And so I just spent some time after that conversation reflecting and finding the balance point between what was important to the person and also honoring the work that I was doing. And that, you know, when one is taking risks with their work, they're not going to please everybody. And so part of my own self-care was like learning to trust my path or my direction in what I was doing with the work that I'm doing. So that's just one example. I mean, you could talk for a long time on that, right? But that's one direct example of how I handled it in the process of doing these bodies of work.
And for me, self-care has to be fun, and I have to have that play with it. And so I need people to play games with. So I feel really creative thinking of games I want to play with people where we can learn about each other and really talk about the feelings and experiences we're having together. Games are really just a container for a way to be together.
The role of play in your work, I find really fun and challenging at the same time, because it's not something that, especially as adults, we're always really good at. We need practice at it, and so I think your work's kind of that invitation to practice that. It's a skill and a self-care skill for sure. Well, then there's some questions that are coming up in the chat, which is fantastic. Thank you all for commenting and offering some questions. So now I need to go and try and find those. Let me go back. Yeah, so there was a question. What is the role of intergenerational intimacy / relationships in your work? How does that support your self-care practice? The person who offered that, I'm not sure if that is specific to any particular artist or if that is for anyone. To everyone.
Well, one thing I can say is even through my mother's addiction She is a beautiful writer, beautiful writer. And I know that I get my artistic qualities from her. And then a family friend was telling me that from an aunt of mine that was murdered, that she was very artistic as well. And so they would be my elders. And then my daughter and I, we paint together. And I think that it's important that we share with each other. My son is a comic writer. My daughter does sewing and some other work as well. And my middle son is a very talented writer. And all three of them were able to help me on my last book with the illustrations, with the narratives. And I just believe that the older generation is to teach the younger generation, and the younger generation is to influence the older, and so that we continue to learn and collaborate with each other, that no one's more powerful than the next, that we all can glean from each other's life experiences and talents.
I would just build on what Randiesia just said, that the learning can happen both ways. And for me, I'm in my mid-30s, and I feel really like I really appreciate this moment of being sort of in between generations. And through programs like State Gold, I have friends who are younger than me and friends who are older, and there's a lot of cross-generational learning that's possible in settings like that. So thank you, my friend CJ, for the question. Kathleen?
Well, I alluded to my son, right? And who is I just texted him. He had to hang up to go make dinner. But I just said that he was, and he has always been my guiding light and my greatest teacher. So I have seen it have this interweaving of us each guiding each other respectively. I don't assume because I'm, my age that I have a bead on things. Far from it. In fact, the older I get, the more I know I don't know. And I often rely on him to say, hey, so tell me, what music should I be listening to right now? Help me stay relevant. And so, and just to ask for his feedback on the work that I'm doing. I give him feedback on his creative work. And it's really a partnership, and I'm every day so grateful for it.
As a parent, I can greatly relate to that need to and an honor of having youth in my space that I can check in with and engage with and collaborate with. It's really important. Yeah, thank you for that that question. And I think we've got time for maybe one or two more if folks are willing to hang around. There's a question in the chat. Does anyone have insight regarding how to weave issues around conservation and social justice together in an artistic expression?
I don't know personally in terms of my own body of work. However, I have seen many examples of it. A friend of mine, her name is Kimmy Eisel, and she is a writer and a performance artist. And a couple of years ago, she did a series. It was a grant that she got funded through the National Endowment for the Arts, and it was a year-long program in which that had multiple phases, and it was about our relationship with the saguaros here in the desert. And it was a remarkable process. We learned how to harvest fruit, for example, from the native people who have the right to harvest the fruit. There were musicians that went out and chose a saguaro to perform, to play their musical instrument to. And then there was another exercise where school children were taken out, and adults just to sit in front of a saguaro and meditate for an hour with the saguaro and see what it had to say. And it culminated in a performance and writing. So there are many artists that are doing that sort of performance work, interweaving art with conservation. And I'm happy to connect you to her, and she could probably bridge you to other people doing similar work.
So with my work in regards to conservation, so one of the things that I try to do is get recyclable material, like this palette here. I just kind of found it, and I use material that I find outside to paint with as well. And another project that I'm working on is called the Urban Forest Project. And the Urban Forest Project is where we have created a forest, a food forest in the city for low-income recipients who are Black, Indigenous, people of color, and American descendants of slaves. And they live on property. It's a housing project. And the whole goal in that whole project was to reduce the heat island effect by 50% in that area. And we noticed that more people of color live in urban areas where it's hot, especially here in Tucson. And so we have created this with Scale Up program with Local First Arizona. We are creating this urban forest for people who need housing and they need food on campus.
I'm saying pass. Awesome. Well, thank you all to the questions and from the chat. I really appreciate it. I guess I maybe would just like to close with a question that I think definitely touches upon all of your work, and I would really value each of you to talk about this and kind of take us out with your perspective on this. Is talk about like what kind of activism is true activism as artists, and what do you perceive is more performative of artistic activist action?
I think that question is relative, because one of the things that I notice is that everyone can protest and be an activist in a different way. And we may not all agree on each other's method of activism. Nevertheless, it is still activism. Like my role is to let me go paint, let me get my work put in a museum. You're going to see what I'm doing. You know, you may not see me out in the street, but that's okay, because that's what they're doing. And, you know, it's their thing. And my thing is, let me paint and let me go build some housing. Let me go show them what I can do. Robert Smalls, he was a slave who escaped with a Confederate ship, and he sailed to the north. And one of the things that he said was that, I'm paraphrasing, he's like, my people can do anything if you just take the roadblocks away. And look, I'm in this museum this year. I've been in several museums this year. I've been in several galleries, and you're gonna see my Black work and my big Black lips and my kinky hair, and you're gonna see me everywhere. And that is my role in activism, because I'm gonna show my face and I'm gonna say my name is Randiesia, and I'm gonna be proud of it. That's activism.
Em or Kathleen, any last comments to that question or anything else you'd like to share with us before we end tonight? Thank you so much for that, Randiesia. It was definitely all snaps and applause for that. It was fantastic.
One thing that I have learned in my own process of re-educating myself over the last handful of months is I have heard from many Black people, many Black friends, that I, or any of us white people, we are not to identify ourselves as allies. It is a designation that a BIPOC person gives us if they recognize that the work that we are doing is of allyship. And so that really gave me a lot to think about. So I used to kind of say, oh, I'm an ally, I'm doing this and that. And I don't say that anymore because I don't know that I am. I hope that I am. I hope that my work is deemed helpful and useful. And I've always been drawn to help in some way. And right now, this is what I'm doing with these I recognize that I have a platform where I can amplify other people's voices. And I hope that that is activism. I hope that it is helpful. And all I can do is the best that I can and be willing to be corrected, have a spaciousness to be open to feedback, and to continue to follow my heart about what feels like the right action at any given time. And thank you very much once again for the invitation to be here today.
I'll just follow up. Kathleen, similarly, I know my voice is not always needed, and I actually see myself more as a facilitator and someone who's guided by the community and what the conversation is there. So I think my role is to pay attention and to listen, and then I try to work myself as a connector between people and projects and learning. And thank you, Chelsea and Olivia and Kathleen and Randiesia.
Well, I think closing with that idea of active listening, ally is a verb and listening is a verb, is a great way to close this out. I want to extend again my absolute gratitude and thanks, sincere thanks to Miller, Kathleen Dreier, Randiesia Fletcher for sharing your works, your work with the exhibition at the U of A Museum of Art. Any other links to their work, to their Instagram pages as well, is also on their pages on the Museum of Art exhibition page. So you can, if you missed anything, you can find information about their work there as well. And thank you three for sharing your voices and ideas and experiences and advice with us all here today. So a silent virtual round of applause. And again, another thank you to all of you here joining us today from near and far. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. It was an absolute pleasure to end my day sharing space with such incredible people. I hope that you all connect with us again. Next semester, we have another series of great talks, again, highlighting all the artists from this incredible exhibition, Picturing 2020. I hope that you all take these little words of wisdom into your life, take radical self-care of yourself, and I wish you all a happy new year. Thank you all for coming.